The sound of the cement truck idling outside my property was the first warning. A low growl that didn't belong in the quiet rhythm of birdsong and running water. I walked down the slope toward the creek that had cut through my family's land for over a century, carrying fresh mountain runoff that fed fields, wildlife, and even parts of the town downstream. That creek was more than water. It was heritage, it was life. And when I rounded the bend, I froze in disbelief. HOA Karen, her wide stance planted like she owned the very soil under her feet, was waving her arms at a crew of hired workers who were pouring heavy gray concrete straight into the creek bed. She saw me and smirked, wiping sweat from her flushed face with a hand that clutched a clipboard stuffed with fake permits. "We're improving the neighborhood," she shouted over the rumble of the truck. "This open water is a hazard. The HOA voted to fill it in. You should thank me." The sight was sickening. My creek, the creek my grandfather had fished in, the creek where deer and herons came at dawn, was choking under cement, its clear water foaming against the sludge. I shouted at the workers to stop, demanded to see their paperwork, but Karen stepped in front of me, chest puffed out like a shield of arrogance. "We don't need your permission. This is HOA jurisdiction now. Your creek runs behind our homes, so it belongs to us." Her voice dripped with triumph, as though she'd finally claimed a prize she'd been after for years. Neighbors peeked from their decks, some shaking their heads, others too scared to interfere. Everyone knew Karen's wrath, her endless fines, her threats, her reign of terror built on fear. But this was different. This wasn't a garden gnome out of place or a fence painted the wrong color. This was destruction of nature, destruction of heritage, and it was happening right before our eyes. I didn't scream back. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began to film. Every second, the cement pouring, the water rising, the arrogant smirk plastered on Karen's face captured for evidence. I asked her again, voice steady but carrying so every neighbor could hear, "Where is your permit? Where is the county approval?" She waved her fake paperwork like a magician showing a trick card, but her eyes flickered with unease. She hadn't expected anyone to challenge her this directly. By nightfall, the video was online, and the reaction was volcanic. Environmental groups shared it, county officials were tagged 100 times, and activists demanded an investigation. But the twist came when a hydrologist named Dr. Patel showed up at my door the next morning. He had seen the video and explained that my creek wasn't just water, it was part of a protected watershed, feeding underground aquifers that sustain the entire neighborhood. "If they block it," he warned, "the water doesn't disappear. It finds another path, and that path might run straight under their million-dollar homes." Sure enough, within weeks of Karen's concrete stunt, the ground began to change. Lawns in the HOA's pristine cul-de-sac grew soggy, pools warped out of shape, and cracks snaked across the foundations of houses worth millions. The same families who had once stayed silent under Karen's rule now found themselves wading through ankle-deep mud in their basements. And Karen? She barked at them to be patient, claiming the HOA would fix it. But behind closed doors, panic spread. The confrontation reached its peak at an emergency town meeting called by the county. Karen strutted in with her usual arrogance, still clinging to her clipboard, still declaring she had authority. But across the aisle sat Dr. Patel, county officials, and dozens of angry homeowners whose dream houses were sinking into bogs. Evidence was presented. Satellite maps, soil studies, proof that Karen had ordered the concrete dump without any legal approval. My video of her shouting, "It belongs to us now," played on the projector for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen tried to fight back, jabbing her finger at me, accusing me of fabricating evidence, even claiming I had sabotaged the creek to frame her. But every accusation crumbled under the weight of the truth. When Dr. Patel explained how her concrete had diverted water under their own homes, neighbors turned on her with fury. "You ruined us," one woman shouted. "My house is collapsing because of you." Others stood, voices rising in a chorus of rage that drowned out Karen's shrill protests. For the first time, she wasn't feared, she was cornered. The county judge's ruling was devastating for her. Charges of environmental destruction, fraud, and reckless endangerment. She was personally liable for millions in damages. Her so-called empire of HOA power evaporated overnight, leaving her bankrupt and disgraced. Deputies escorted her out as she screamed about conspiracies, her voice cracking under the weight of her downfall. The aftermath was bittersweet. Families faced costly repairs, some forced to move, others banding together to salvage what they could. But the creek, though scarred, began to heal. County crews tore out the concrete, restoring the flow of water. Wildlife returned, and neighbors gathered along the banks to plant trees and rebuild what had been lost. What Karen had tried to bury became a symbol of resilience. The creek flowed stronger than before, a living reminder that nature cannot be silenced by arrogance. My neighbors, once divided and silent, were now united, bonded by the hard lesson that fear only empowers bullies until the truth sets people free. Karen thought she could bury the creek. Instead, she buried herself. The weeks that followed Karen's arrest and the county ruling were a whirlwind of both justice and chaos. The neighborhood that once lived under her tyranny was now knee-deep, sometimes literally in the mess she had created. Luxury homes that had sold for millions just a few years earlier now sagged on warped foundations. Lawns that had once won Karen's prized HOA beautification awards had turned into swamps where mosquitoes bred in stagnant water. Families who had whispered their complaints behind curtains were suddenly shouting them from rooftops, demanding answers, demanding repayment, demanding to know how they had allowed one woman's arrogance to dictate the ruin of their lives. Karen, of course, refused to go quietly. Even as she sat facing charges, she tried to organize secret meetings with her dwindling circle of supporters. She sent out letters typed in bold font, declaring herself the legitimate authority of the HOA and insisting that the county scientists had fabricated evidence to frame her. But the people weren't listening anymore. Those letters ended up crumpled in trash bins or pinned to bulletin boards as jokes. Children drew cartoons of her Karen, the cement queen holding a bucket of concrete while houses sank into the mud around her. The twist came when an environmental lawyer named Monica joined the fight. She had been following the case online and reached out to me personally, bringing with her a team of experts who specialized in environmental crimes. They uncovered something that left us all stunned. Karen hadn't acted alone. The construction company that dumped the concrete had been operating without proper licenses, cutting corners for years, and Karen had been receiving kickbacks for hiring them. Every yard of concrete that choked the creek had been $1 in her pocket. This wasn't just arrogance. It was corruption. When Monica presented the evidence at a second hearing, the room went silent. Karen, pale and sweating, tried to laugh it off as standard HOA contracting. But the proof was undeniable: bank transfers, emails, even text messages bragging about how she'd found a way to turn a useless stream into cash. The neighbors who had once cowered now erupted in fury. One man stood and shouted, his voice shaking, "You didn't just destroy our homes, you sold us out for pocket change." The fury spread like fire, people standing one by one, demanding justice not just for the ruined homes, but for the betrayal of trust. Karen's empire of intimidation collapsed in a single day. The construction company executives were indicted alongside her, and suddenly what had been a neighborhood scandal turned into a county-wide corruption case. The news stations couldn't get enough of the headlines blared, "Concrete Queen Exposed," and "HOA Tyrants Greed Sinks $1 Million Homes." She became infamous, her face replayed on every screen, her name a synonym for arrogance turned to ruin. And yet, amid the outrage, something beautiful happened. The creek, freed from the concrete, began to heal. Volunteers came from across the county to help dredge the sludge and replant the banks. Children painted signs that read, "Our creek, our future," and staked them proudly in the soil. The sound of running water returned, mingling with the laughter of people who had once feared to even speak above a whisper. The creek had become more than water, it had become a symbol, a reminder that truth, like nature, always finds a way to break through. The climax of Karen's downfall came at her final sentencing. The courtroom was packed, neighbors filling every seat, reporters scribbling furiously. Karen shuffled in wearing a wrinkled suit that no longer fit her, her once commanding presence deflated. She tried one last time to regain control, pointing her finger at me, at the county, at anyone she could blame. "You'll regret this," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Without me, this neighborhood will fall apart." The judge didn't flinch. He read the sentence clearly. Years in prison for fraud, environmental destruction, and corruption. Millions in restitution owed. A lifetime ban from serving on any board or community leadership position. Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing, as deputies escorted her out. The room erupted not in cheers, but in a wave of relief. A collective exhale from a community that had been suffocating for too long. The transformation afterward was breathtaking. With Karen gone, the HOA dissolved entirely, replaced by a voluntary neighborhood committee focused not on punishment but on cooperation. Families who had once avoided each other now shared meals on porches. Instead of obsessing over lawns and fences, people planted gardens together, creating a patchwork of color and life. And at the heart of it all flowed the creek, alive again, stronger than before. I'll never forget the day we held the first Creek Festival, a celebration of both nature and community. Tents lined the banks, musicians played, and children splashed in the shallows. Mrs. Jensen, who had been fined 3 times by Karen for planting daisies instead of roses, stood proudly selling bouquets of wildflowers. Formerly silent neighbors gave speeches about resilience, about the power of standing together. And when the sun dipped low, lanterns floated on the water, carrying messages of hope, written by children who had never known life without Karen's shadow. The creek had given us life, and in defending it we had found our voices again. Karen's attempt to bury it in concrete had instead unearthed the truth, a truth so strong it sank her entire empire and lifted us out of fear. Karen once declared the creek a hazard, but in the end, the real hazard had been her greed. And when her empire sank into the bog she created, the rest of us rose stronger, united by the water that would never be silenced. So now I ask you, as Karen's fate, stripped of power and drowning in the mess she made, enough justice for what she did? Or do you think someone who poisons both land and trust deserves an even heavier reckoning?